Hello! We are doing our presentation on the herpes simplex virus of 1 and 2, both of them. And this is by myself, Emily, Marisa, and Abby. So, some little history of HSV is that the origin isn't really known fully, but some of the earliest signs and accounts of the herpes virus was in some ancient Greek writings of
Hippocrates.
Anyway, yeah, that. And then in 1919, a man named Lewisstein really confirmed that there was various strands of the herpes virus. The word herpes is actually a Greek word that means to crawl or to creep. So yeah. Okay, so the biology of the disease is kind of complex. There's many different variations and strands, about 80 of them, which is kind of a lot. And it's the virus itself is composed of a double-stranded DNA that is enveloped in an isocarbonyl capsid around it. And HSV really just penetrates the cell membrane into the lower layers of the host cell where it replicates. Outwardly, it presents in tiny fluid-filled blisters or sometimes cold sores, and inflammation around that is kind of what it looks like. But the herpes simplex 1 and 2 are very, very similar, so if you looked at them in a microscope, it would probably look the same. But some more differences between HSV1 and HSV2 is HSV1 is found normally in areas above the waist, so really commonly around the mouth, and so it's called oral herpes a lot. And HSV2 is usually found below the waist, and it's also known as genital herpes because that's where it's usually found. But these can both also be found and transmitted to the opposite half, if that makes sense. So HSV1 can be found in the genital area and HSV2 in the oral area. But the main difference is the location where they lay latent. So HSV1 is typically remains inactive in the nerves at the base of the neck, whereas HSV2, the nerves at the base of the spine. So, Abby is going to tell us what the similarities are.
Okay, so similarities between HSV1 and HSV2, they both can be found anywhere on the body if it's transmitted right. Scientifically, HSV1 and 2 are extremely similar. They share around 50% of their DNA and 85% of genetic material. So the epidemiology, we have a lot on that. HSV, it's evident worldwide with over 23 million cases per year. HSV1 has been found most prevalent in African countries. Population's at 87% of the 3.7 billion infected worldwide. America is the lowest in occurrence at 40 to 50% of those infected. Studies show that economics also play a role in the popularity. By age 5, over a third of children in a low-income area are infected, whereas only 20% of middle-income areas are infected. By the time Americans of all economic statuses reach the age of 60, roughly 60 to 80% have encountered and contracted HSV1 because it's very common. HSV2 is more commonly found in developing countries, showing that 70% of women and 55% of men live with this virus in sub-Saharan African countries. And women are more likely to contract HSV2. The lowest seroprevalence is found in Western Europe, showing that only 18% of women and 13% of men carry it. So transmission and how it is transmitted. It's transmitted through bodily fluids, including semen, saliva, fluid in the female genitalia, and fluid directly from a herpes lesion or sore. Virus must have direct contact with the mucous membrane or the broken skin to be able to infect, and it can be reduced or stopped by reducing contact with the lesion of an affected person. And so I actually have a spreading story for HSV1. My cousin, when he was born, when he was a newborn, someone came to see him, and they actually had a latent HSV1, the virus, but they didn't have a cold sore or any symptoms. And so they kissed him, but they kissed him on his thumb, and now he gets cold sores, but he only gets them on his thumb, which is kind of interesting because it is commonly found on the mouth, and he gets cold sores on his thumb randomly. So it's kind of a interesting transmission story. So we have a few medical treatments and drugs. The drugs can't cure HSV, but they can lessen the symptoms. Antivirals are the most commonly used to combat viral replication, but they must be taken several times a day. Repressive treatment can reduce outbreaks by 70 to 80%. There's ongoing investigating of vaccines for both HSV1 and 2. Previous studies found that vaccines are ineffective in men. However, a vaccine known as GEN003 is being studied for women and in phase 3 of testing. Topical treatments are effective for HSV1, like Abriva, it's very common, in accelerating the time and comfort of healing. Over-the-counter drugs and herbal supplements can also be taken to aid in lessening the severity of symptoms and pain. And non-pharmacological relief can be obtained from getting adequate rest, nutrition, and exercise. And so now Marisa is going to come and finish us off.
Okay, so the current research, like she mentioned earlier, there is a vaccine that's in phase 3 of testing called the GEN003, and it is more geared towards treating women. And so in HSV, the severity of the disease is characterized by the presence of lesions, the concentration of, or how many you have. And the vaccine was proven to reduce the number of lesions present by 43 to 69%. So that was a pretty significant reduction. And the viral shedding of HSV2 was diminished by 55%. And although the vaccine has shown to be effective in treating the people infected, it is not a preventative measure. It can only be used for therapeutic reasons. And for the social impact of the disease, it can affect sexual relationships due to the transmission, but there are actually dating sites for people that have herpes simplex virus. As a society, HSV is estimated to affect about 1 in 6 people, with HSV being more prevalent among young children and HSV2 more prevalent among women. Having HSV also puts its host at a higher risk for contracting things like HIV, and these are both long-term, across the lifespan diseases or viruses. And HSV also has the ability to enter into the frontal cortex of the brain and central nervous system, causing an even worse disease called herpes simplex encephalitis. And researchers have possibly identified a link between HSV1 and Alzheimer's disease. HSV1 resides in the trigeminal ganglion of the body, and that location, it just has easier and quicker access to the brain, so it can spread its viral contents into your brain. So in conclusion, herpes simplex virus can be broken down into type 1 and 2. Both are very, very similar. They're actually identical under a microscope. Type 1 is commonly oral and type 2 is commonly genital. Herpes simplex virus can be presented with blister-like sores or lesions. It is transmitted through bodily secretions or contact with an open sore or lesion. African countries are most at risk for contracting HSV1 because the population is more affected by it. It's more concentrated in those areas, and there is no cure, but treatment is available to lessen the symptoms, and like I said, it is infectious across the lifespan. And HSV can increase one's risk of contracting diseases like HIV and things like that. So, and there are references and I hope you enjoyed our presentation on herpes.